Welcome back to Sow, Grow and Cook, and Happy New Year. I hope you all had a lovely holiday season, great Christmas, Hanukkah, whatever it is you celebrate or don't. We had a nice one here. We had lots of family come and visit, which was really good. And now it's all quiet again. And I thought today I'd just chat to you a little bit about some of the things that I've learned about gardening in 2022. So some learning curves for me, because even though I'm an experienced gardener, there's still things that I don't know about and things that come as a bit of a surprise to me. And having only lived in this small holding for it'll be 4 years in April, we're still kind of observing and learning a lot about the land that we tend and that we live on. The first thing is how our garden copes with extremes in temperatures. So, for example, in 2022, we had quite an extended dry, cold spring. So you'd have sunny days, which fooled you into thinking, oh, this is lovely and warm. Let's get, started on our gardening and things. But the nighttime temperatures were very cool, sort of in the high 30s, low 40s Fahrenheit, or sort of single digits centigrade. And that does not make for good growing conditions. It kind of slows down the growth of quite a lot of vegetables, even if you plant them as strong seedlings. Following on from there, we then had a very hot, dry summer, which caused drought conditions in quite a lot of parts of the UK. Not so much here in our part of Wales. The land that we've got here is very, very wet. In fact, when I had family visiting from England here in Wales, they commented about how when they crossed the border from England into Wales, everything seemed quite a lot greener. And that's because we get a lot of rain in Wales. But there's rain and there's rain. And in our bit of Wales, the bit that I live in, we seem to get an awful lot more rain than even other parts of Wales. And in the summer, if you have a hot, dry period and what would be considered drought conditions everywhere else, things just start growing and thriving because there's quite a lot of retained groundwater that they're drawing moisture and nutrients from the soil from. So everything seems to be growing okay, even when other areas of the UK seem to be faltering. So that was a bit of a learning curve for me. I didn't have to do that much watering and things grew really well. On the other hand, in the polytunnel, which is a drier environment and also retains quite a lot of that heat from the sun, it was an absolute scorcher. So even if I left both ends open and watered every single day, things drooped and some things died and some things bolted because it was just too hot. I mean, I looked at the thermometer in the polytunnel, and I think one day it was 120 degrees Fahrenheit. I mean, it was really seriously hot. I could barely stand in there, and that was with the doors open. So as a result, certain things took longer to come to fruition. Like I had a few little tomato plants in there. I don't grow most of them in that polytunnel, but I do grow some spares in there, and they took a lot longer to set fruit, and I think that was due to the extreme heat. Things just don't pollinate and set well when the temperatures get too high. Right, I've made a few notes. I'm just checking my notes here. And this winter, we had, well, for the UK, we had a very cold, extended frost period. We do get frosts in the UK, but they're usually sort of in January, February time. But this year we had one in early to mid-December, which lasted a couple of weeks really, and we had below 0 Celsius temperatures, which I know isn't quite as cold as some of your Fahrenheit temperatures in North America. Nonetheless, it didn't really get above freezing for several days here in Wales, and the ground was very frozen all day, every day for about at least 7 days. And all the things that I've normally grown for winter veg were really challenged, and I found out what's really a tough vegetable and what's not as tough as I thought it was going to be. So the things that did well despite that cold spell were things like leeks and kale, absolutely unaffected, and parsnips, although I couldn't get at the parsnips until we had a bit of a thaw. But parsnips actually improve in flavor once they've been frosted. So that was all good. Now I had Brussels sprouts growing outside the polytunnel, because in the past I've grown them in the polytunnel and thought, why am I bothering? They are so cold tolerant, I shall just grow them outside and save the polytunnel space for something else. Well, that was a bit of a mistake, because even the Brussels sprouts got frosted and many of them turned to mush, and I couldn't use them on Christmas Day, which was a real shame. Fortunately, I had bought some from the supermarket, so all was not lost. The younger, newer Brussels sprouts growing further up the stem seem not so affected, so I'm hoping that later on in the winter I'll be able to pick some. Okay, right. Things that did really well in the polytunnel were things like Claytonia, winter purslane is the other name for it, and the rocket, or I think you call it arugula in North America, and spinach, proper spinach, that seemed unaffected. I mean, everything drooped on those really, really icy cold days, but they perked up again, but certain things didn't perk up and subsequently died, like bok choy, choy sum, and a couple of the oriental mustard plants that I'd grown, which was a real disappointment because they add so much flavor and color to winter salads and things. So again, I now know, and I didn't know in the past, that certain things, even brassicas, which are meant to be really, really cold tolerant, only like cold up to a point, and then some of the brassicas just die after that. So Brussels sprouts, not so good. Kale was fine. I had about 6 beautiful Savoy cabbages growing outdoors. Now, they've got a reputation for being winter cold hardy, and they went to mush. They just kind of turned really slimy, and they're really unusable. So again, I'm going to have to think carefully for next year and maybe grow a few more things in the polytunnel and then put some sort of netting or additional protection over some of the things in the polytunnel, or have it ready just in case that we have another extended frost period. So following on from that, I often get asked what gardening zone I live in. Okay, we don't really use zones in the UK, but if we were going to follow a zoning chart, I guess we'd be roughly an 8 here, but I think that only pertains to frost dates. It doesn't really give an indication of how warm or cold the rest of our winters and summers are. So although an 8 might seem quite mild, which it is, and we can normally grow things over the winter, as I explained earlier, um, our summers don't get very hot compared to maybe a zone 8 in the USA. So we have much more temperate and kind of even temperatures, no major extremes except for this last year. So it's really important to kind of learn your microclimate for your particular area. So each of my neighbors has got a different microclimate to my garden. My garden, our garden, Bob and I's garden, is surrounded by fields. It's got a little bit of a hedgerow as well on one side, but there are no buildings sort of near the garden, the actual garden, so it doesn't get the benefit of any residual heat coming off the buildings. And this is a very rural area, so there are not that many buildings around anyway. So if you live in a town in a built-up area, you'll find that the temperatures are often much warmer and your gardens kind of benefit from that residual heat that it gets given off in the evenings. We don't have that. We're kind of in a more exposed open area. Having said that, my neighbor up the road, 300 yards or meters or so, has a very sheltered garden surrounded by hedgerows and plants and some outbuildings and their house. And they might just be that little bit higher up as well. We have a bit of a frost pocket in our garden because we're on a gentle slope with sort of a little hollowed area at the bottom of the vegetable garden. And last June, I had a very late frost in that lower part of the garden. It was something like the 14th of June. And whenever I bring this up to my neighbors either side, they always sort of nudge themselves and go, oh, she's off again talking about that frost she got. I know they believe me. It's becoming sort of a running gag between some of us, because I do tend to go on about it, and they probably get a bit tired of hearing about Saron's late frost. Anyway, it just shows that even though you can live in the same area, same road, your microclimates are very unique. So get to learn about yours. On the back of seed packets, they give you sort of guidance for planting things, but that's such a rough guide, and really you've got to take into account what the weather is actually like, the patterns you've noticed. And that takes time. You really kind of need to make lots of observations and write things down. When you get sun in your garden, how long you get sun in your garden, what bits of shade you get and where they are. Whether you're high up and you get quite a lot of very drying or cold winds, or whether you're in a bit of a hollow and you get a bit of a frost pocket like I do. So learning your microclimate's quite an important thing to do, very useful thing to do. So just make notes in your gardening diary. Right, enough of microclimates. So what are my plans for this year? Well, in the short term, this week I'm going to be planting my peppers, my chilies, and my eggplant or aubergines, because they need a long time to germinate and mature and to fruit and to ripen. They're much slower at producing than, say, tomatoes or other heat-loving plants. So I always plant mine early in the season, but you have to kind of really look after them and keep them warm and sheltered. I have a little greenhouse outside which I can pop them into on sunny, warmer days, but for now, they will just be indoors, probably in a electric propagator, just to kind of help the soil warm up and get things going. And then as the season progresses, before I put them in the polytunnels, I may have to repot them once, twice, maybe 3 times if necessary, if the weather conditions are not quite right. Okay, so that's the short term. In the longer term, I'm going to be planting some sugar beet to follow on from my little experiment in making sugar beet molasses. That was a couple of videos ago. And I'll be planting more things that I can store for food use in the winter. So tell me in the comment section below what your plans for 2023 will be, because I'd be really interested in seeing what you've learned from last year and what your plans are for this year. One last thing. Thank you very much to my lovely viewers, Lily and Alex, who very kindly sent me a gimbal thing for Christmas to help me make better videos, because I tended to hold the video or hold the camera in one hand whilst I was doing things, and it was just getting very wobbly and not very professional looking. This is such a game changer, so much appreciated. It's very kind. And as always, thank you for watching Sow Grow and Cook, and see you next time. Bye for now.